I remember the smirk on her face like it was branded into my memory. We were all seated in the old mahogany-paneled office of my grandfather's lawyer. Polished wood, leather chairs, the kind of room that smelled like secrets and power. The air was thick. Everyone knew why we were there. When Mr. Rollins, my grandfather's lifelong attorney, opened the manila folder and cleared his throat, my cousin Tiffany leaned back with folded arms, ready to collect. She thought it was hers. All of it. The estate. The business. The house with the white shutters that she used to throw parties in while Grandpa was in the hospital. But she didn't know what I had. I waited until Mr. Rollins started reading the original will, and then calmly slid an envelope across the table. Tiffany's eyes narrowed. She didn't smile after that. Have you ever had proof in your hands, proof that shattered a lie your whole family believed? Comment below if you've ever been betrayed by someone who once shared your dinner table. I wasn't supposed to be his favorite. At least, not according to the family. From the outside, it looked like my cousin Tiffany had it all. The beauty, the charm, the spotlight. Her father, Uncle Mark, was Grandpa Walter's eldest son, and everyone just assumed the crown would pass straight down that line. Bloodline loyalty. Old school succession, you get the picture. But behind all the Sunday brunches and fake smiles, it was me, the quiet granddaughter from the wrong side, who had Walter Whitaker's heart. I was raised by a single mom, Linda, after my father, Jacob, disappeared before I turned 3. Mom was Grandpa Walter's youngest, and the family always treated her like the black sheep. She didn't marry rich. She didn't dress right. But Grandpa? He saw her struggle, and he saw me grow. I still remember being 8 years old, sitting in his study while he polished his pocket watches. He had a whole collection, always ticking, always winding. He'd place one in my hand and say, "Time is the only thing you can't buy back, sweetheart. Spend it on people who earn it." Every Saturday morning, he'd pick me up in his old red Ford pickup, said it was the only car he ever trusted. We'd go get donuts and sit by the lake while he told me stories about how he built his hardware empire from nothing. He'd arrived in Kentucky with $12 and an idea, opened his first shop in a rented garage, and by the time I was born, he had 12 stores across 3 states. But what made him special wasn't the money. It was how he treated people. Every employee got birthday cards, paid leave, and even free groceries if they were going through a tough time. He remembered everyone's names. He cried when one of the clerks, Miss Sherry, passed from cancer. That was who he was. He taught me how to sandwood, how to change a tire, how to negotiate, and not just with money, but with values. When I got my first job as a cashier at 16, I remember him walking in, standing in line just to smile at me and say, "My girl's a working woman now." And then there was the garden. He loved his garden more than he loved his businesses. Rows of tomatoes, basil, sunflowers tall enough to touch the sky. I helped him plant them every spring. That's where he taught me patience. Some things can't be rushed, baby. Not growth, not truth. I didn't see it then, but those moments were his way of giving me something no one else had: his time, his wisdom, and his trust. Meanwhile, Tiffany would show up to family events late, if at all. When she did, she'd bring designer purses, boyfriends with jawlines sharper than steak knives, and an ego that filled the whole room. Grandpa always tried to include her, but I could tell his eyes would dim a little when she brushed off his questions or interrupted him to scroll her phone. He never said anything bad about her. That wasn't his way. But I noticed the shift. When I turned 22, he offered me a part-time position in his office, shadowing his accountant, Mr. Leonard. "Figure I'd better start grooming someone," he said with a wink. Tiffany didn't even know the password to the Wi-Fi in the main office. I never thought any of this meant he'd actually leave anything to me. I didn't need him to. What he gave me, those Saturday mornings, those life lessons, his unconditional belief in me, was worth more than any check. But deep down, I think he knew. He knew this family would turn feral when money entered the room. And maybe, just maybe, he planned for it. Because the year before he died, he started showing me documents. Not explaining everything, just hints. "If anything ever happens to me, you'll know what to do." I didn't understand then. But I would.
Soon.
The first real crack in the foundation came at Grandpa Walter's 85th birthday. It was a surprise party I had planned for months. catering from his favorite barbecue joint, a jazz trio from Lexington, and even a custom cake shaped like his old Ford pickup. When he walked into the hall and saw the spread, he choked up. He hugged me and whispered, "No one's ever done something like this for me." But Tiffany? She showed up an hour late in 6-inch heels, designer sunglasses on indoors, and a man named Kyle, her investment advisor/soulmate, clinging to her arm like a handbag. She barely acknowledged Grandpa. No hug. No happy birthday. She just waved from across the room and headed straight to the champagne. I overheard her in the corner later saying, "It's cute that Hannah still plays party planner. What is she now, a receptionist or something?" I pretended not to hear it, but it stung. A week later, Tiffany posted pictures from the party on Instagram with the caption, "Celebrating greatness, clinking glasses, family first, always."
Not a single photo of Grandpa.
Just her and Kyle posing with the champagne. Still, Grandpa never said a word. He never gossiped, never played politics. But I noticed that after that birthday, he started locking his office drawers more often. And he started asking me to pick up his mail personally, not just from the house but from the post office box downtown. At first, I thought he was just being cautious. But looking back, I realized he was watching the shadows. Then came the hospital visits. The first time Grandpa collapsed was in early November. Minor stroke, the doctor said. He was lucky. I got the call from Miss Darlene, his housekeeper, and rushed straight to the ER. Tiffany, once again, was unreachable. When she finally arrived, wearing a trench coat and sunglasses indoors, like she was shielding herself from poor lighting rather than grief, she barely glanced at Grandpa. "What exactly happened?" she asked the doctor with a tone of detached concern. The nurse handed over a clipboard. "Family member needs to sign consent for overnight care." I reached for it. She stepped in front of me. "I'll handle that." It was the first time I realized she was maneuvering. The next week, I noticed Grandpa's medical bills were being redirected to a different mailing address, her condo in Nashville. I asked him about it gently. He waved it off. Tiffany said she'd help sort some things. Said I shouldn't be stressed. But the next day, he asked me to stop by the bank with him. He removed her name from the emergency account. "I'm not stupid, Hannah," he said in the car. "I just play the game slower than most." I didn't push him, but things got worse from there. At Christmas that year, we all gathered at the house, the big one in Shelbyville that had been in our family since the 40s. The place was full of memories, carved initials on the tree trunk out back, firewood crackling in the same stone fireplace Grandpa built with his father. I brought a homemade quilt I'd been working on for 3 months, with embroidered photos of his life, his Navy portrait, the hardware store opening, him holding baby me. I wrapped it and laid it on his lap by the fire. Tiffany brought a monogrammed cashmere throw from Nordstrom. He opened mine, tears in his eyes, then opened hers, smiled politely, said thank you, and folded it once. That night, after everyone left, I helped him clean up. He looked tired, more than usual. While I washed dishes, he stared out the window and said, "They'll never see past their own reflections." I paused.
Who?
He just shook his head. "Doesn't matter. You just keep being who you are." In February, the second stroke hit. This time it was worse. He lost partial use of his left hand and had trouble forming full sentences. I took a leave from work and moved into the guest room. I bathed him, fed him, read to him from the letters he'd kept from my grandmother, love notes she wrote during his Navy years. Tiffany visited once. For 20 minutes. She brought him an iPad and spent most of her visit trying to get him to use FaceTime. "He needs stimulation," she told me afterward, frustrated. "You've got him reading dusty paper." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just kept showing up. That spring, Mr. Rollins, Grandpa's lawyer, started coming by more often. Quiet, older gentleman, always wore gray suits and brought his own notepad. One afternoon, he asked me to leave the room so he could speak with Grandpa privately. I respected it, until I saw Tiffany pulling into the driveway as I stepped out. I watched from the garden, pretending to trim roses, as she marched inside in full makeup and heels, clutching a manila folder. She left an hour later, without saying a word. That night, I checked the drawer in Grandpa's study where he kept his documents, the one he always left slightly ajar for me. It was locked.
Tight.
I didn't have the key, but I had a feeling. When I brought it up gently, he just smiled. Timing is everything, sweetheart. That's when I began to feel the shift. Not just in Tiffany, but in Grandpa.
He was planning something.
Not out of malice, but out of necessity. And whether she knew it or not, Tiffany had started a race she assumed she'd already won. But she didn't know what he'd already handed me, or where I'd find the rest. It was a Tuesday when I heard the machines go quiet. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and rain. There had been a storm the night before, the kind that shakes windows and wakes you at 3 a.m. I had been sleeping in the corner chair again, curled under a blanket that still smelled faintly like home. The monitors had been beeping all night in their slow, predictable rhythm. One for his heart, one for his oxygen, and one for the 4 drip that seemed slower every day. At 6:11 a.m., they stopped. I knew it wasn't a malfunction. I knew because I didn't feel him in the room anymore. When I got up and walked over, he looked peaceful, like the version of himself that used to doze off in the garden, arms crossed, sun hat tilted just enough to hide his eyes. His hand was still warm. I pressed the nurse call button. I whispered, "He's gone." They came quickly, quietly, a blur of soft shoes and gentle hands. A male nurse closed his eyes and said something kind. I don't remember what. I couldn't hear anything above the silence. I called my mom first. Then, against every instinct in my body, I called Tiffany. She answered on the second ring. "Hello." "Grandpa passed," I said. "This morning." She was quiet for a second. "Okay, I'll handle the arrangements." That was all. No gasp. No tears. Just entitlement. And that's when I knew. She wasn't mourning, she was moving. The next 48 hours were a blur. The funeral home, the calls to extended family, the obituary. I offered to write it. Tiffany said she'd already done so. When I read it in the local paper the next day, it listed Walter Whitaker, beloved patriarch, survived by his grandchildren Tiffany Whitaker, and my name was misspelled. She'd submitted it without asking. The funeral was held at St. James Episcopal, where Grandpa had gone every Sunday for decades. The pews were packed, employees, neighbors, veterans, old fishing buddies. I gave the eulogy because Tiffany said she couldn't handle speaking. But she did handle the post-service lunch. She hired a private caterer and rented out a winery for the after celebration. It was the first time I saw people sipping Pinot Grigio next to an urn. She clinked her glass. To the man who built a legacy and who entrusted us to carry it forward.
Us.
She said it like we were a team. But I was just an accessory in her acceptance speech. A week later, the family gathered for the will reading. Mr. Rollins hosted it in his downtown office, lined with law books and antique clocks. The Whitakers filed in like it was a red carpet event. Tiffany wore black silk. Uncle Mark sat with his arms crossed like a CEO in a deposition. My mom sat next to me, wringing her hands. Mr. Rollins cleared his throat. As executor of Walter Whitaker's estate, I have here the final will and testament, dated June 14th of this year. Tiffany sat up straighter. He continued, the primary beneficiary, according to this document, is Tiffany Marie Whitaker. She shall inherit the Shelbyville house, the business assets, and all remaining liquid funds. There was a pause. My stomach dropped. Tiffany smiled. Uncle Mark nodded. Someone patted her back. I sat there, frozen. That's when Mr. Rollins looked directly at me. However, Tiffany's smile faltered. There is a matter that requires clarification. This document was superseded 3 weeks later, on July 3rd. That amendment was submitted, but not notarized due to Mr. Whitaker's hospitalization. Therefore, excuse me, I said, standing slowly. I reached into my bag, pulled out the sealed envelope Grandpa had given me 5 days before his death. It had my name scrawled in blue ink. I'd been too afraid to open it until that morning. I handed it to Mr. Rollins. He opened it, unfolded the papers, and read silently for a long minute. Then he turned it toward the room. It was a handwritten addendum, witnessed, dated, and recorded on Grandpa's home security cam, with audio on a thumb drive that I had in my pocket. It stated, in his words, "In the event of my death, I hereby name Hannah Lynn Whitaker as my sole executor and beneficiary of all properties and assets, including but not limited to the Shelbyville estate, Whitaker Tools Incorporated, and any holdings listed in my account at Shelbyville First Bank. I make this decision with full mental clarity, and I do so because she is the one person who has shown me consistent truth and care without expectation." Tiffany went pale. "Where did you get that?" she hissed. I met her eyes. "From Grandpa, the day before he died." She lunged forward, but Mr. Rollins stood up. "Ms. Whitaker, please sit. This document has been verified. The handwriting matches, the date aligns with home camera footage, and the witnesses have signed affidavits. But the previous will," Uncle Mark barked, "is invalidated by this," Mr. Rollins said calmly. "It will be filed in probate court today." There was silence. Tiffany sat down like someone had pulled her strings loose. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The rest of the room stared at me, like I'd grown a second head. But all I felt was relief. And love. Because in the end, Grandpa didn't leave me money. He left me the truth. The courthouse steps were steeper than I remembered. Or maybe I just felt taller. It had been 3 weeks since the reading of the will. 3 weeks since Tiffany went radio silent. 3 weeks since the whispers started, within the family in town, even among the former employees of Whitaker Tools. Everyone wanted to know how the quiet granddaughter ended up owning everything. I didn't owe them explanations. But I had one conversation left to have. I sent her a message. "Meet me at Grandpa's house. Saturday.
Noon.
Come alone." The house sat quiet under gray skies, shutters drawn, the porch swing creaking in the wind. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, the one with the faded linoleum floors and the same old kettle on the stove. The house still smelled like cedar and black coffee like him. At 12:07, I heard the tires on gravel. Tiffany walked in without knocking. Her heels echoed on the hardwood. She wore her usual armor, tailored blouse, sleek ponytail, sunglasses still on indoors. She looked around, like she was inspecting damage. Then she spoke. "You look comfortable." I didn't move. "I am." She took off her glasses slowly. "So, what is this? A victory lap?" "No," I said. "This is closure." She scoffed. "Closure? You swoop in, pretend to be his little caretaker, and walk out with everything." I gave him space. I respected his independence. "You avoided him," I said, voice steady. "You missed holidays, skipped check-ins, showed up only when you thought there was a check to collect." Her mouth tightened. "He promised me the business. He said it would all be mine." "No, Tiffany," I said, reaching into the drawer beneath the counter. I pulled out the letter. The original. His handwriting neat, deliberate. I read aloud. "Tiffany believes legacy is a spotlight. Hannah understands it's a responsibility." She stared at it, but didn't speak. "I didn't ask for any of this," I continued. "He gave it to me because I showed up. I sat with him when he cried over Grandma's letters. I drove him to appointments. I knew what mattered to him." She looked away. "You manipulated him." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I loved him, and I earned his trust. You weaponized his name for clout." Her voice cracked just slightly. "You don't know what it's like to be born expected to carry a legacy. Everyone always looked at me like I already owned it. And that's why you never earned it." Silence fell between us. Then I placed the envelope gently on the counter, the one that contained Grandpa's voice recording. His last words about the estate.
"You can listen to it," I said.
"Or not. But you should hear what he really thought of you. And me." She didn't reach for it. "I'm not keeping the house," I added. "I'm turning it into a nonprofit, a mentorship center for young entrepreneurs. The company will stay in the family name, but it'll fund programs, apprenticeships, not yachts." Her face contorted. "You're just trying to look noble." "No," I said. "I'm trying to be what he believed I already was." She grabbed her purse, sunglasses trembling in her hand. "This isn't over." I met her eyes. "For me, it is." She stormed out. I didn't follow. Instead, I walked out to the backyard, where the garden used to be, now overgrown with weeds and wildflowers. I knelt down and placed the last sunflower seed Grandpa ever handed me into the soil. I whispered, "We're planting something different now." Inside the house, the audio recording played softly, Grandpa's voice, scratchy and warm. "If you're hearing this, Hannah, then you already know the truth. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you trust to carry the torch. You've always had the flame." It's strange how quiet the world becomes after a storm. For weeks after the confrontation, I barely heard from anyone in the family. No follow-up calls. No invitations. No small talk over text. It wasn't a clean break, more like a slow, cold fade. The house in Shelbyville, once filled with family cookouts and birthday dinners, sat silent. I walked the halls like a stranger with keys to a museum. The pictures on the wall, black and white photos of Grandpa as a young man, Mom in pigtails, even a few of Tiffany and me as children, felt like relics from a life I wasn't sure had ever been real. At first, I told myself I was fine. I had the will. I had the documents. I had the truth. But what I didn't have was a family. Mom tried to bridge the gap. She called Uncle Mark. He didn't pick up. She sent a message to Aunt Rebecca. It was read and ignored. Eventually, she stopped trying. "Some people would rather believe a lie they can control than a truth they can't," she told me over tea. Even Miss Darlene, Grandpa's housekeeper for 14 years, grew distant. "It's not personal, honey," she said when I dropped off her final paycheck. "It's just things feel different now." I nodded. Because they were. The legacy didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a weight I hadn't expected to carry alone. One evening, I drove to the Whitaker Tools flagship store, the one Grandpa opened in 1982. His name was still etched in gold on the window. Walters, built to last. I walked the aisles in silence, remembering how I used to trail behind him as he greeted customers by name and showed kids how to use tape measures like magic wands. The manager, Tom, met me near the back. "You're really going through with it?" he asked. I nodded. "The mentorship program starts next quarter. We're converting 2 back offices into training rooms." He smiled, gently. He'd be proud, you know, even if nobody else says it. That meant more than I expected. But not everyone felt the same. A few former employees quit. They said they were loyal to the old ways. One even accused me of turning the store into a charity case. I didn't argue. I just thanked them for their time and wished them well. There were nights I cried into my pillow, wondering if I'd made a mistake. Wondering if Tiffany had been right, if I'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Then I found the box. It was buried in the crawlspace, behind stacks of tax folders and dusty Christmas lights. Inside, dozens of letters, all addressed to me. They were written over the course of 2 years. Little notes Grandpa had jotted down, never mailed, never handed over. Some were typed. Others scribbled on napkins or receipts. All full of thoughts he hadn't said out loud. One said, "Today, I saw you teaching the new cashier how to balance a drawer. You're more patient than I ever was." Another, Tiffany called again. She asked about the stocks, never asked about my health. And one that simply read, "When the dust settles, remember, you didn't take anything. You just accepted what was already given." I sat on the floor, surrounded by paper and memory, and sobbed harder than I had the day he died. Because in that moment, I realized something painful and freeing all at once. I hadn't lost my family that day at the will reading. I had simply seen them clearly for the first time. All the years of being the helper, the quiet one, the second-place kid, they had prepared me to carry the truth alone, if I had to. And somehow, I still had him with me. In the words, in the garden, in the quiet, in me. The first thing I did was breathe. Really breathe. Not the shallow, automatic kind, but the kind where your chest rises like a tide and your ribs ache with the stretch of healing. I stood barefoot in the garden, the one Grandpa and I used to tend, and I felt the damp morning soil beneath my feet. The sun broke, through clouds like a soft apology. That was the first day I started choosing peace. I enrolled in therapy, something I'd been afraid to do while Grandpa was sick. I'd always thought being strong meant not needing help. But strength, I've learned, is also about knowing when you're running on empty. Dr. Lawson was kind but firm. He didn't care about wills or family feuds. He wanted to know who I was without the title of executor or granddaughter. That's when I realized I hadn't thought of myself as Hannah in months. I started journaling again, not about the past, but about the future. Not about loss, but about possibility. One afternoon, I took the plunge and opened the doors to the new mentorship center, the Whitaker Legacy Project. A space where teens from small towns could learn practical skills, carpentry, welding, finance, entrepreneurship. Things Grandpa believed in. Things public schools had stopped teaching. We had 10 kids in our first group. One of them, Isaiah, 14, shy, brilliant, reminded me of myself. Quiet, observant. He stayed after class one day and asked, "Was the old man really your grandpa?" I nodded. He looked around the room. The workbenches, the chalkboards, the framed photo of Grandpa hanging above the entrance. "He must have believed in you a lot," Isaiah said. I smiled. "Yeah, he did." I started hosting Sunday dinners at the house, not with family, but with people who showed up when it counted. Mom, of course. Tom from the hardware store. Miss Sherry's daughter, who remembered Grandpa teaching her how to jumpstart a car. Even Mr. Rollins came once, bringing fresh cornbread and an envelope of Grandpa's last business notes. It felt like building a new kind of family, not one defined by DNA or expectations, but by presence, by effort, by kindness. Tiffany? I haven't seen her since that day in the kitchen. She sent a letter. Not an apology, but a warning. Something about legal reconsideration and emotional distress. I handed it to Mr. Rollins, who placed it in a drawer and said, "Let it gather dust."
So, I did.
Instead, I built. I repainted the shutters Grandpa never got to. I installed a bench by the garden path with his initials carved in the wood. And I finally opened the locked drawer in his study. Inside, one photo. It was me, maybe 8 years old, sitting on his lap, covered in soil, holding a tomato in one hand and a broken shovel in the other. We were both laughing. On the back, in his neat, slanted handwriting, he had written, "This one is the real heir." No signature, no date, just truth. And it was enough. If you're still here, thank you. Thank you for sitting with my story, for breathing through the silences with me, for letting me speak what, for so long, felt unspeakable. I didn't share this for sympathy, or revenge, or even justice, really. I shared it because I know what it feels like to be erased, to be the one who stayed silent too long, to be the one they counted out until the truth couldn't be buried anymore. I know how heavy it is when people dismiss your grief just because it doesn't look the way they think it should. I know what it's like when family turns into strangers with familiar faces. I know how it feels to hold something sacred, a memory, a love, a promise, and have others treat it like it's disposable. But here's what I've learned. You are not defined by who left you out. You are defined by who you became in their absence. You are not disqualified because you didn't have the loudest voice in the room. You're powerful because you kept showing up without needing a spotlight. I used to believe blood was thicker than water. Now I believe this. Family is not who shares your last name. It's who stays when your world falls apart. It's the people who show up with casseroles and silence when you can't find words. It's the friends who hold space when you're angry and raw and messy. It's the mentor who believed in your potential before you saw it for yourself. Maybe for you, that person was a grandparent, or a teacher, or a neighbor. Maybe they've passed on. Or maybe they're just no longer part of your life in the same way. But I want you to know this. They didn't waste their love. You're still carrying it.
Right now.
And if no one ever told you, I'm proud of you for surviving what they never apologized for. I'm proud of you for standing tall even when you felt like your legs were shaking. I'm proud of you for choosing healing over bitterness, not because it's easier, but because it's braver.
So, I want to ask you something.
Have you ever been betrayed by the people you thought would protect you? Have you ever uncovered a truth so inconvenient it changed everything, even your sense of belonging? Have you ever walked away from what was expected of you to live a life built on your own values instead? If you have, please tell me in the comments. Not for me, but for you. And for the others watching right now, silently nodding, saying, I thought I was the only one. You're not. Your story matters here. This space, this channel, isn't just for content. It's for connection. It's for reclaiming narratives we were told to keep quiet. It's for remembering that there is always more to the story. And if this resonated with you, share it with someone you love. Someone who needs a reminder that even when truth costs everything, it's still worth the price. Because legacy isn't about money. It's about what survives when people forget the details and remember how you made them feel. That's what my grandfather taught me. And now I'm passing it on. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want more stories that speak the things we've all been taught to hide. And if you're watching this and feeling alone, you're not. You're seen. You're heard. You belong here.